and welcome to this week's edition of The Briefing Room. I'm your host, Bill Froehlich from WTCM Radio News, and we're joined this week by a couple of gentlemen from the Traverse City Record Eagle. We're talking sports this week, and we've got Mike Eckert. Welcome back, Mike. Good to have you back.
Thanks for having me back.
And James Cook, also a sports writer for the Record Eagle. James, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having us on.
We are joined by our various caffeinated beverages this morning, and we wanted to talk a lot about sports today. We've got a lot going on out in the sports world. Of course, football season just getting started professionally, but also high school season. We're right in the thick of that. Let's start with that, guys. Traverse City Central TC West. That's the big rivalry game, and you were there for that one, weren't you, James?
Yeah. It was a really good game, start to finish. West tried to make that comeback in the fourth quarter and couldn't quite do it, but it was a pretty good game for 48 minutes.
What did you like about what you saw? And maybe just take me through even quarter by quarter as you saw that game kind of unfold.
Central's offense was pretty impressive. Their special teams, of course, were good too, but they had to make some adjustments due to some injuries coming into the game just on a short week of having a couple of guys hurt. Their backfield, basically, both of the guys in the backfield were dinged up, so they had to make a lot of adjustments. And they had a sophomore come in and start at tailback for them, Ethan Campbell, and he just took the reins and ran with it. Got over 100 yards, had a 99-yard kickoff return for a touchdown, and just kind of exploded onto the field there in his first start.
Was he and I'm not the sports expert, so fill me in, was he the guy who had 4 different scoring situations that game and just kind of stepped up to that vacant role?
Yeah, he caught, I think, a screen pass for a touchdown. He had a touchdown run. He had the kickoff return for a touchdown, and then he threw a pass to the backup, to the guy who he was starting in place of, TJ Schwaneke, on a halfback option pass.
Not a bad night's work then for him.
No.
And so where was he a week ago? Was he on the bench?
He's been playing the whole season. He just hasn't been starting because they've got Nate Pupil and TJ Schwaneke ahead of him, 2 pretty good seniors, and they've been doing very well and everything. But Pupil got banged up in practice, and Schwaneke dinged up his knee either during the week during practice or earlier in the game or something. Okay. And they really had to change things up.
Turning point in that game, anything that's kind of stands out for you where you kind of saw who was pulling away?
Well, West was able to score first. They got the ball and just marched down the field and were able to score and go up 7-0. And I think the backbreaker was Campbell's 99-yard kickoff return. I almost thought his foot was in the end zone. I mean, it was 99.5 yards. And he just took it, busted right up the middle, and he was gone. And suddenly a game that West looked like they were in control of 7-0, it comes 7-7 a couple of seconds later, and West never led it again.
It changes that quick.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, give me your take on those 2 teams this season leading up to the big one.
It's interesting. That game, it doesn't matter if they're 6-0, 0-6. You throw out the records, that's always going to be a good one. It was interesting to have it this year where they were both they were on top, and it was for the lead in the Big North Conference. Right. And they both were getting points in the state polls. So it's not just that they're good teams up here; they're kind of getting recognized as among the best in the state. And so it's interesting to have them both happen at the same time. That's not always been the case. One will be up, one will be down, and so it really set up for quite the matchup. And now looking forward, that they both. Even though West lost, they're still in good shape to make the playoffs. Central's kind of in the driver's seat now. They're a win away from clinching a playoff berth. Now they're even looking at hosting a game in the playoffs. So, this has been a really good year for both teams already, and it can continue here as the playoffs approach.
You guys obviously get the perspective of the insiders in the sports world, but from a fan perspective, this is a huge game too, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was an estimate that it was between 9,000 and 10,000 people there at the game, and and it was just crazy. They had the whole Patriot game thing this year, which was big, with selling the red, white, and blue T-shirts, and they had the big pregame ceremony that everybody seemed to really enjoy and everything. And the teams got into it, went down and shook hands with every one of the veterans that was there before the game and everything. So it was a pretty cool atmosphere.
Yeah, the coaches seemed to put they were obviously active in the whole notion of having a Patriot game, but they seem to take an interest also in just the importance of that and getting that message across to the young guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Tim Moore's connection to Kingsley and Sergeant Justin Hansen kind of sparked in just the football community in northern Michigan, just the whole patriotism and the people fighting for our country, and I think that really kind of carried over. And what a better format for it, or a showcase place where you've got there won't be a bigger crowd in northern Michigan watching football this fall than that game last week. So.
Now, West holds the series record on that. Am I right? Is it 14 and 5 now, or something like? Or
Yeah, West I think has won 11, and Central's won I think 5.
11 and 5.
Yeah.
Okay. But again, like you said, you kind of throw those records out the window when it comes down to game night, don't you?
Yeah, and that's kind of that record is kind of lopsided because after the split, West was the dominant football team for 6-8 years.
Yeah.
And then Central had to kind of catch back up to them and everything. It just seemed that West, I don't know how it happened or whatever, but West seemed to get all the football players or something like that for a while after the split or something. But West just kind of dominated that for it's probably 6 to 8 years.
Okay. Well, like I said, we're well into the high school season now. So what's left in terms of teams across northern Michigan that we're still watching, and which ones still have a shot here, Mike?
I think a couple of the big things that you watch St. Francis always. I mean, they've been kind of the team from northern Michigan that's made the longest runs, and here they're sitting 3-3, and so they need to either win out or get some help to make the playoffs, which usually it's just kind of a given that they'll be there. And this year it's not. They've got some tough road ahead of them. So you watch that, and then we've got a couple of good conference races still, which as teams kind of transition into now it's time to try and make the playoffs or get ready for the playoffs. There's still a couple of good races, and I guess the biggest one's the Lake Michigan, where it's just right now you've got Boyne City and Grayling as your undefeated teams, the ones that are kind of standing out, but they play the last week of the season, and they both have tough games to get there. So that's still a tough race, and 3 weeks to go, a lot can happen.
How about you? Any other insight? Like you said, Mike, St. Francis, you kind of always expect to be there, but they've had a struggle.
Yeah, and it's been kind of interesting in the Lake Michigan Conference being so wide open and so competitive. I mean, normally it was just fighting for second place behind St. Francis, and now without St. Francis there, you're seeing a really good race with those two teams. You're seeing a better Harbor Springs team than normal, and it's just make for a pretty good race. Overall, kind of in the area, I think there's probably kind of maybe almost fewer playoff caliber teams this year than there have been in recent years in the area, but there's still some pretty good teams like Mansalona and Grayling and Boyne outside of the TC schools.
Historically, what do we expect out of, for example, Traverse City teams, Central West, St. Francis? How many of them have typically gone to the playoffs in any one year, and are we set up this year to see, with two of them going? Is that unusual?
I think it's pretty common for us to get 2. It's pretty rare for 3. I think we had it in 2008. We had all 3 make it, and that might have been the only time it's happened. That's a rare feat, and right now it's funny. Who'd have thought at the beginning of the year that Central West would be the two that look like locks, and St. Francis would be the question mark. So I think the big thing for Central and West is the chance to host. Usually when they've gotten into the playoffs, they have to go on the road, go down to Grand Rapids, go to Muskegon, somewhere down there, and have a tough game. Mm-hmm. If they're hosting, maybe they won't get one of those elite teams in the state, and hey, they get to have it at Thirlby, so that makes it a whole lot easier right there.
I was going to ask, do you think home field advantage plays much of a factor at the high school level? Obviously, you can get 10,000 folks into Thirlby, but when you're down in Muskegon, you'd be lucky to get, 100 of fans there.
Yeah, and when you get a school like Central or West, when they make the playoffs, in previous years, it's been they've just barely been getting in, getting in at 6-3, maybe 7-2. West had a couple of good years where they went 8-1 or 9-0, but then you get in, and then you have to go down to Grand Rapids and play a powerhouse team like Rockford. And that's just got to be hard for a high school player. You finally make the playoffs. Plus, you're coming off until last year. You're coming off, your rivalry game against Central or West, depending on which school you're from.
Right.
So you're coming off that high, and then now you have to take a 2-hour bus ride to go play probably with the best team in the state. It's much easier if you're doing it at home. And both teams have a shot at it. If West wins out and goes 7-2, the Grand Rapids teams are not quite as good this year as they were, and even at 7-2, you have an outside shot of hosting a game. It'd be interesting if Central and West both get a home game, what they would do with Thurlby.
Yeah, Friday, Saturday. Yeah.
Probably, but depends on who they're playing, I guess, and how far they're coming away.
And I think just with that, home field probably doesn't make as much of a difference when you've got Elk Rapids and Boyne City, where it's not that far either way. You're going to have the same fans for whoever's home field it is, and travel's not bad. But the travel for the playoffs, when you're talking about these Grand Rapids teams, so somebody, if there's a game here Friday night, is going to have school Friday, have a 2.5, 3 hour bus ride up here, and then play a football game. And that's tough, and that has to be a little bit of an advantage for the home team. And so maybe not the crowd's going to be the point or the advantage, but certainly that travel and having to schedule everything, you don't want to go on the road if you don't have to.
That's right. You move from Shakespeare and algebra into running plays and X's and O's that way. Well, let's real quickly shift gears into pro football. Lions, maybe not necessarily as exciting to talk about as our high school teams this year. What's going on? Are we in for another downer of a year for Detroit?
Well, they have to correct those special teams mistakes that they're making. I think they probably would have won the last 2 weeks if it wasn't for special teams mistakes. So you're looking at a team that could pretty easily be 3-1 instead of 1-3. They definitely would beat Tennessee if you don't allow 2 touchdown returns. You give 2 touchdown returns to Minnesota, and the defense only gave up 1 offensive touchdown to Minnesota. Yeah. So, take away special teams, and they're probably 3-1. But still, you can't do that, and their special teams has just been wretched this season. They can't tackle anybody. They're not in the right lanes, and I just don't know what the problem is. But
it's funny. A quarter of the way into the season, and I think everyone kind of looked at them before the year and thought, well, they don't have a lot of help in their defensive backs. That might be the weakness for them, that their defense isn't as good. You're thinking they're going to get in a lot of track meets, win like 45, 35, some of those kind of games. And it's really been the offense that just, besides the special teams, of course, the offense has just been stale. And it's the same playmakers as last year. You really kind of scratch your head as what's going on here, that they just, something doesn't seem right with their offense. They're not clicking yet. So
I was going to say, they get a bye week this weekend, don't they? Time to regroup a little bit.
Couldn't come at a better time.
Right, because they got to come up with a little different game plan on offense, because teams are just, the first couple of teams that they played this year, they're sitting back in a 2-deep zone, and daring the Lions to put together an 8 or 12 play drive, because they don't think that they have a running game, which for the most part they haven't, aside from that one good game by LeSure. So teams have just been betting that they can't put together a long sustained drive and plan to take away the long play to Calvin Johnson.
They call it the not for long league, the NFL, and it's really true. It's funny watching it, how you have one good year last year, and now if fans kind of expect that this is what we are, and even when you stumble a little bit, the boos last weekend, you could hear them through the TV at the game. The fans aren't putting up with it. They expect to win now and win every game, and it's after so many years of just being down and out, to have 1 year, it's really been a turnaround. I don't think people will, just go back to same old Lions. There's going to be some uproar if this continues another quarter of the season. If they're only at 2-6, they need to pick it up.
Well, let's take a break here on the briefing room. We're on a sports edition this week, and when we come back, I want to talk baseball. Tigers are doing some great things, obviously, this year as well. So we'll do that after this break. We'll be right back.
What is Up North TV?
It's TV that you do.
You pick the topic.
You write the script. You run the camera.
You edit the video.
It's your vision.
Your perspective.
Your story.
Commercial free.
Free speech. What is Up North TV?
It's me.
It's you.
It's all of us.
View us on Analog 97.
Cable digital too.
Digital 992.
UpNorthMedia.org.
Welcome back to the Briefing Room. I'm Bill Froehlich, your host from WTCM Radio News, and we're on a sports edition this week, talking with James Cook and Mike Eckert, both from the Traverse City Record Eagle sports writers at the paper there. Guys, thanks again for coming in.
Thank you.
Let's shift gears to baseball. We talked football in the first half of the show, but we're coming off of Traverse City Beach Bum season, one of their best seasons ever by the numbers, setting a lot of records, some great all-stars, and a great shot at getting deep into the playoffs. Unfortunately, it just kind of fell apart in the first series. James, give me your take on what was, other than the last 4 games of the year, what was otherwise a remarkable year?
Yeah, a lot of things just seemed to click into place, and they had such a great regular season. They played almost the same lineup almost every day. It's like you could come to the ballpark and know who was going to be hitting second, third, seventh, eighth even, almost every day. They just used the same lineup every day. They were able to avoid injuries. They didn't have any major injuries or anything like that with the pitchers, the rotation. Everything just stayed the same, and everything just clicked. So they won a franchise record a number of games this year, set a lot of records, like you said, and everything. And then in the playoffs, it just kind of, and they had everything set up well for the playoffs too. Yeah. They had clinched so early that they were able to set up their rotation, so they had their 1, 2, 3 guys going at the beginning of that playoff series, and they just didn't score runs for any of the 3.
Yeah, it was tough to watch. And full disclosure, I work for the Beach Bums during the summer too. But what was fun about the year was, just about every night, or at least once a homestand, it seemed, I had a note passed along to me about what record did we break this time, or who set a new franchise mark for this or that category. So there was so much fun stuff to talk about all year long, Mike.
Yeah, it's with the Beach Bums. You go there at the start of the year, and there's always a lot of optimism. This is going to be the year, and on paper, the team they assemble every year, it looks like this could be a good team, and in some of the years past, it hasn't been. They've had some struggles. I think obviously it's disappointing when they go out, and I'm sure the Werfels, I know they want that Frontier League title, but I guess the one good thing that I'm sure they can take away from it is they've got the right mix in there. They figured out the right mix of players, the right managers. They almost have it down to a science now, where you got a feeling that if they didn't get it this year, they're going to get it in the next year here, next couple of years. They're close. So I'm sure there'll be a few new faces next year, but they figured out the right kind of people to have in there, and so I think they're in the right direction. They're close. They're knocking on that door. So
the challenging thing, and maybe you guys can jump in and help explain it to those folks who are watching, but the Frontier League rules about how long you can keep players and veteran players, and there's only so much time where we're going to have a Chase Birch on the Beach Bums before he just simply ages out of the system, right?
Yeah, it seems like they tinker and tweak that rule almost every year. The league changes it a little bit. So now you can keep one player basically almost kind of indefinitely. I think up until the age of 30 or something maybe. It used to be 27 was the maximum age. But now if a guy's been with your team for a couple years, you can keep him past that and stuff. So if they wanted to keep Birch, and that would probably be a pretty good one if he's willing to stay, they probably could. But then it's after that, there's the other guys. There's the Jeff Flaggs, the Ryan Stills, and Colligans, and those kind of guys, where it's always a numbers game as to how many of those guys would be able to keep. And there was some of the pitchers last year. Last year we thought they were going to have this awesome bullpen back intact from last year and everything, but because of the age rules, they were only able to keep a handful of them. They had to let some of the guys who were really good relievers last year go because they just simply couldn't keep that many guys in that age category, or the veteran category.
Yeah. Is that, that's hard as a fan. It's hard because you want that major league experience where you've got a franchise player that, you can watch for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, or your kids can grow up with Chase Birch every year or something along those lines. But have you guys talked to the players in terms of how that is on them or what their take is? Just getting into those finer points of the rules.
I guess we haven't talked so much to the players about it. I'm sure the ones that are here, I'm sure they want to be back because when you look around the Frontier League, it's hard to beat Traverse City in the summertime. That's a nice gig to get for them. But I think it is frustrating to you have turnover every year. But I think for the Frontier League, it's a good rule to have. And it gives you, especially now they've increased the amount of veteran players or the length that you can keep some of those guys around, so you get that a little more. But I think it's a good for that league, an independent league, to have some rules like that. So you have a good mix of veteran guys, the guys that are going to have another career in something else later down the road, but want to keep that baseball going a little longer. And then the guys that are just trying to, get their way to the minor leagues, to still on that career path, trying to break through. So you get a good mix, and it's probably good for the young players too to have some of those veteran guys, a Chase Birch on a team that's going to guide you a little bit, show you what it's like to be a professional. So to have that balance, really, while we'd like to see the same guys over and over, I'm sure it's good for everybody involved.
Yeah, I mean, you get the part of the purpose, they say, of for the Frontier League is to develop guys for the next level and to get them into affiliated ball and everything. So if you're keeping the same 27 and 28-year-old guys, they're most likely not going to go back to affiliated ball. I mean, major league scouts, once you turn 26, you're pretty much not labeled a prospect anymore.
Well, give me one, maybe just one nugget if you can, inside baseball that we can share with folks. What do you know about these guys outside of the beach bums? What are we doing in the off season? Because obviously in pro ball it's a lot different. Here where you're making relative pennies, you've got to do something else the other 8-9 months out of the year.
Yeah, and even the coaches and Greg Langben goes back to his home in Wisconsin, and he runs a baseball academy during the off season and referees high school football games. I was just talking with Chris Kay, the backup catcher, the other day, and he writes for a fantasy football website in the off season.
Yeah, you hear a lot of them, when they're here for media day in the spring, they're just finishing up school. They do some school in the off season, and then you get some of them that coach. Scott Mueller last year coached a JV team to a perfect season. And then you've got Dunn. He's in training to be a police officer. So
really?
Some of those guys that are kind of already looking ahead to what's next. That off season. And I'm sure a lot of working out, getting yourself in good training for the season. But yeah, kind of one foot in the door of your next career too.
Yeah, that's funny.
Maybe that's why he's working on that mustache.
That's true.
And I don't remember who it was last year. I wish I could remember from last season. I don't know if it was JT Hall or somebody, but somebody was telling me their job throughout the year is a college tutor. That just kind of blew my mind. They're a math tutor. It was just a really funny notion. Well, let's in the closing moments here, we got to talk about the Tigers. What a fantastic year all around for the team. Miguel Cabrerra obviously knocking on the door of a lot of good things too. Who wants to jump in?
You're gonna go ahead on this one.
Triple Crown, first time in 45 years. It's as a kid growing up when you start reading about some of these things and hearing about Yastrzemski doing it and thinking that's cool. And I remember watching the stats for the kids or the players when I was growing up to see if anyone could do it. I heard about this Triple Crown, but it had been so long, and so then to finally see it was special. But then to see it on the team that you follow, I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better. It really made for to the last month of the season. Every at bat with Cabrera, you had to watch to see what was happening and tune into some of these other guys to see if they were hitting home runs. And
it did come down to, I mean, even Wednesday afternoon, we were watching Josh Hamilton, one home run shy of Cabrera's mark too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, it came down to the wire, and I guess if Cabrera would have played the whole game on Wednesday night and Mike Trout would have, that even the average could have worked out that way. Now, since the game didn't mean much, they probably wouldn't have left Cabrera in for that long, but
right.
It's funny when you don't really pay attention to batting average over the course of the season, but to watch in a segment like that, how much it can go up and down. A couple points here, a couple points there. It's moving all over the place.
How about you, James? What do you take away from this point in the season and Cabrera as well?
Yeah, I mean, you have every once in a while where a player can kind of chase the Triple Crown and everything, but it was just kind of interesting this year too, in that the added thing is that normally when somebody is in this position to even be in contention for the Triple Crown, they're a shoo-in for the MVP. But this year you didn't have that. You had the season that Mike Trout had, so you had the constant argument of Trout versus Cabrera for MVP, even though Cabrera is chasing something that hasn't been done in 45 years. So it added a whole other layer to that story, and it's still a debate that even though Cabrera locked up the Triple Crown, people are still going to argue that Mike Trout should win the MVP.
We have to wait till November till that's announced, but boy, when it is, there's going to be a unhappy camp one way or another, because as passionate as the Detroit fans are about Miguel Cabrera, should be the MVP, it should be a slam dunk. The Angels and there's a whole contention of people there that they feel the same way, that what he's done is far and above what Cabrera did. So either way, somebody's not going to be happy about it, and there's a lot of passion behind both camps.
Is there still time for a swaying factor in terms of playoffs if one of these guys, steps up and fills the role to help launch a team into the World Series or something along those lines?
That's kind of the interesting thing about those awards is they cut them off at the end of the regular season. So they have the writers vote on them right now before the playoffs get going. So, yep. So wow. It's decided here.
Mm-hmm. I think the fact that the Tigers and Cabrera did make the playoffs and Trout and the Angels didn't may be a small factor with some of the writers too. But we'll have to wait until the awards are announced in November to see.
Yeah. Well, tell everybody who gets to make that call, who gets to vote on that. Are you guys among the sports writers that cast the ballot?
No,
we are not, but I think we'd be happy to. We'd those are fun things to do. But yep, it's the baseball writers on the national level that get to do that. So yep, we'll just be observing and waiting in November to see what happens with that. And another one too, we'll be watching the Cy Young, because Justin Verlander has a good shot of repeating with that one. So, it's in a season that was kind of up and down, and even just a week or so ago, you didn't know if they'd make the playoffs or not. Statistically, they had some unbelievable years with Cabrera and with Verlander, and they made the playoffs. And so now you kind of focus your attention to that, and hey, they have good a shot as anybody now that they're there. So it's going to be a fun couple weeks.
I was going to ask you about that too. Like you said, 2 weeks ago, I kept hearing calls for it's time to get rid of Leland. We're done. This is it. We're going down, behind the White Sox, and it's over. Now that we're in the position that we are, what are we, 3 games ahead of Chicago, heading into the playoffs? What do you make of the chances, and B, the future of Jim Leland? Are we still talking about that like we were 10 days ago?
Yeah, well, Leland's been on a series of one-year contracts for a while now, so it's something that comes up every year. I think it'll kind of be up to him to an extent, whether he wants to come back or not. If he wants to come back, I think it'll be hard for the Tigers to say no, as much as a lot of fans, kind of nitpick about his managing style and everything. But if they win the World Series, you never know. He may decide to walk away, but I think he'll probably be back next season.
Yeah, I agree. I think he made the playoffs. It's hard to fire a manager after making the playoffs. I think with them, they're at the point now where making the playoffs isn't and shouldn't be good enough. They've been here before. It's not like 2006 where they hadn't been to the playoffs
Right.
in almost 20 years, and just being there was great, and anything was icing on the cake. This year's different. You know, when you have the returning MVP and Cy Young winner in Verlander, and hopefully the new MVP in Cabrerra. You know, you've got all the pieces in place. You're here. You've been here. You've got experience, and you really look at it on paper. There's no other team that's far and above better than the Tigers are. You know, they're right there in the mix with everybody else in the playoffs. So now it's time to do it. The expectations certainly have been raised. I mean, when Mike Ilitch brought in Prince Fielder, he didn't do it just to make the playoffs. He did it to win a World Series.
I was going to ask you, obviously Prince Fielder's been a factor in the team. Is he the factor that's gotten us to this point?
He's definitely helped Cabrerra. I mean, if nothing else, I mean, it's another guy that gets on base regularly. I mean, you think of Prince Fielder as a power guy and everything like that, but for a guy with that much power, he gets on base a lot, gets a lot of singles and things too. I mean, he hits 300. So with those two guys in the middle of the lineup, it's hard to pitch around them, and I think that their two styles are pretty well suited for the playoffs too. I mean, you see teams like the Yankees where they have, you know, a lineup of 1 through 9 where everybody hits 20, 30 home runs, but then in the playoffs comes, nobody hits home runs.
Yeah.
You know, because the pitching is so much better that the home runs just dry up, and you got to be able to manufacture runs. Cabrerra and Fielder are guys who can hit the ball the opposite way, who can get you those singles and doubles that you need when, you know, because of the way the pitcher's pitching, the home run is almost not even an option.
Gotcha.
You
We
know?
may have to go through the Yankees too, right?
It's possible. Yep. And besides, you know, the protection that Fielder obviously gives Cabrerra, you can't pitch around Cabrerra. You can't intentionally walk him like they did a year ago. You watch him, and he's always having fun. And I think just his personality is rubbed off on the team. You know, he's a good piece to have in your clubhouse where, you know, he's a professional player. You know, you never hear of any problems with him, but he's having fun while he's doing it, and that rubs off. You know, it's a long season. You got to loosen it up a little bit, and he always seems to be right in the middle of it. He's always got a big smile on his face, and I think having those kind of guys, I mean, that's not why you pay him the money that you do, but it's certainly a good piece to go along with it.
Absolutely. Well, it'll be fun to keep watching as the playoffs unfold, and hopefully we'll get you guys back. We can talk about the World Series win or something along those lines later this year. We are out of time on the briefing room. I want to thank Mike Eckert and James Cook from the Traverse City Record Eagle, sports writers for the newspaper, and thank you guys for joining us on the sports edition of the briefing room this week. I'm Bill Froehlich, and hope you'll join us again next time right here on the briefing room.